started. So, once again, good afternoon. I'm incredibly humbled and honored to stand here before you today to introduce what we believe is a transformative piece of legislation called the Green New Deal for public schools. Now, a piece of legislation like this doesn't come along or come together with just an individual person or an individual group. It takes collaboration, it takes patience, and it takes a lot of love. So I just want to start by acknowledging the researchers at the Climate and Community Project. We have to acknowledge them because they were a part of this from the very beginning, and we held each other's hand as we wrote this bill over the past year. And I want to mention that as well. It took a year for this bill to manifest. I also want to give a shout out because all of this, for me, it's about care. It's about care for the economy. It's about care for the environment. But it's also about care for our communities, our families, and our children. Care for our children. So I have to acknowledge and give a huge shout out to the Groundworks crew, both the staff and the students who are here with us today, who have already begun to do some of the transformative work that we are introducing, not just for the Bronx, but for the entire country. This bill is about a new vision for our public schools. Our public schools, particularly schools in our historically redlined and marginalized communities, have been neglected for decades, and they have fallen into physical disrepair. But as we introduce and pass transformative policy for the 21st century, we cannot speak about our schools in isolation because schools do not operate in a vacuum. Schools are a central part of our communities. And I would often say our schools are the heartbeat of our communities. So as we introduce this policy, a Green New Deal for public schools, we are, yes, transforming the public school system and the pieces of it, which include infrastructure and the learning environment of our children. But this is a holistic approach to what needs to happen in our schools and communities going forward. So very clearly, this is about environmental justice, this is about economic justice, and this is about racial justice and pushing back against systemic forms of racism which live in our school buildings, literally in the concrete and materials that were used to design and build our buildings. So I had the pleasure of working in public schools for 20 years before going to Congress. I was a school teacher, classroom teacher, guidance counselor, and middle school principal. So I've seen firsthand some of the issues that take place in our schools. Not because the teachers and staff who work in our schools and the families who work in collaboration with our schools do not work their butts off and do not care. It's because of the historic neglect of resources that have not come from our federal government. So we have schools, as many of you know, with no running hot water. We have schools, as many of you know, with drinking fountains that do not work. We have schools, as many of you know, where the drinking fountains that do work have elevated lead levels in them, where our kids are literally drinking water laced with lead. We have schools without proper ventilation systems and proper HVAC systems, which is why we had so many problems occurring as we tried to reopen due to COVID. And we have schools with asbestos that are literally falling into disrepair, and in some parts of the country are now infested with rodents. This is unacceptable. If we are really serious about our democracy and preserving our democracy and maintaining ourselves as an amazing country, we have to do everything we can to take care of our most precious resource, which is our children and the buildings that they occupy. So we are calling on Congress and the White House and the nation to support this initiative. We are looking to invest $1.43 trillion. Hey! We are looking to invest $1.43 trillion in our public schools over the next 10 years, specifically targeting schools that have been historically disenfranchised. We know that public policy from the federal government is why places like Edenwald, where we stand across the street from right now, have not received a dime from the federal government in 10 years. And while schools like Sousa and One World Middle School have never been funded at a 100% rate since my colleagues have been principal in this building. And while places like in this district, Bronxville and Scarsdale and Mamaroneck over the years have received $20 billion more in resources than schools in urban communities. That is inhumane, that is unacceptable. Now, what is this money? All right now. Now, what is this money going? Those things are loud, right? Things are loud. Now, what is this money going to be used for over the next 10 years? We have a goal, a very ambitious goal as a country and as a planet, to get to net zero carbon emissions in the next 10 years. We need to completely end our dependency on fossil fuels. If you want one example as to why that's important, look at the impact of the COVID pandemic on historically redlined communities and communities of color. Because of our dependency on fossil fuels, people of color and people who live in low-income communities are more likely to have upper respiratory illness, more likely to have asthma, and more likely to be vulnerable to a pandemic that attacks the upper respiratory area of the body. As a result, we've had a disproportionate number of people get sick and a disproportionate number of people die in these communities because of the COVID pandemic. Our dependency on fossil fuel has led to more extreme weather events that we've experienced just a couple weeks ago with the storm that took place here in New York City and on the East Coast. We see rising sea levels and we see flooding and the damage of property. We see record number temperatures out west where you have places like Utah reaching peaks that they have never seen before, which has led to the continuation and the persistence of forest fires, which are killing people and destroying communities. On the global level, particularly in the global south, we have climate change leading to famine, which is leading to mass migration, which has caused shortages in food supplies, which has caused violent conflict in countries all over the world. So climate change is real, it's here, and we need to do something about it. And schools, as the heartbeat of our communities, can be the epicenter of clean, green, renewable, sustainable energy, not only for themselves, but for the community, the extended larger community. So we aim to retrofit schools that are capable of being retrofitted with this money, with this investment, to make sure they end their dependency on fossil fuels and become clean, green, renewable oases of energy. We also aim to build new physical infrastructure so that the new schools we build meet the demands of our current climate reality, so that our kids can go into buildings with wide open spaces, breathing clean air, drinking clean water, and growing organic produce in their classrooms, which is already happening in places across the Bronx and in Yonkers. Big shout out to our kids. So it's about changing the physical infrastructure, but it's also about changing the learning environment and what our kids are actually learning in our classrooms. We have to be very honest with ourselves. Our public schools were designed 100 years ago to respond to the Industrial Revolution and to prepare kids to work on assembly lines in jobs for the 19th century. We are in the 21st century. We have to prepare our kids to solve the problems of the 21st and 22nd century. And those problems are rooted in environmental justice, economic justice, and racial justice. And those problems are rooted in the Green New Deal. And I gotta tell you, even 20 years ago, our kids were yearning and begging us to transform public schools for them, because our public schools are designed for a specific type of learner. If you are that kind of learner, you will do well in our public schools. But if you learn differently, what we have done is we've labeled you special ed and discarded you into a smaller class with less resources. But the Green New Deal for public schools is about a new vision, and it's about acknowledging that our kids learn differently. So therefore, the learning environment must be designed to those differences and must be designed to how kids naturally learn and engage with one another when they're in the park playing with each other, solving all of the problems of the park. Our kids are curious. Our kids are collaborative. They are cooperative. They are creative. And they are ready, willing, and able to solve the problems in their own community and solve the problems of the world. So we must invest in them to ensure that they have the resources they need to solve those problems. So this is an exciting time. We are going to work to change the physical infrastructure of our schools, but also the cognitive, social, emotional, and psychological infrastructure of our schools. We're aiming to quadruple Title I funding, because it's not fair that my constituents in Scarsdale have better resource schools than my constituents in the Bronx. We're looking to dramatically increase IDEA funding so that our kids who learn differently have what they need so that they can also thrive. We're looking to hire more teachers, counselors, coaches, and mental health workers, because guess what? Teachers are net zero jobs that we are going to create as part of a Green New Deal for public schools. And we're looking to hire from the community so that people in the community can work on the schools. Both the physical infrastructure, both helping us to retrofit and rebuild the schools, but also to become paraprofessionals to ultimately become teachers in those schools. And then to support the teachers that are there to stay there. And there's a lot more to the bill. I don't want to talk too much. I know I've spoken a lot. I definitely want to pass the mic to others who are here who have been a part of this journey with us. I want to say that Mayor de Blasio's on his way. He's running late. He's the mayor. That happens. But he will be here momentarily. And before I go further, I want to acknowledge a couple of people. First, I want to acknowledge Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Because when she won in 2018, she introduced a Green New Deal resolution to the country, and it shifted the complete conversation, and it created a paradigm shift for all of us. So this piece of legislation is aligned to and a part of her Green New Deal resolution. I want to shout her out also for her Green New Deal for public housing, which we are pushing through Congress. And I need to shout out my sister Cori Bush, who introduced a Green New Deal for cities across the country. So this is a Green New Deal movement. It's an environmental justice movement, it's an economic justice movement, and it's a racial justice movement. And this is about jobs and rebuilding our economy, centering it on care. Care for ourselves, our families, our communities, our children, and our world. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic to Professor Dr. Akira Drake Rodriguez to say a couple of words.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I am very grateful to be here and to finally introduce this legislation and the report written by my colleagues at Climate and Community Project, including my colleague Erica Kitzmiller, who's over there hiding, my colleague Daniel Aldana Cohen, and a host of others who have worked very hard to bring this research into legislative form. I started working on this project a couple of years ago at a school board meeting in Philadelphia, where there were children wearing masks as they had been to school for some time before the pandemic began. They were wearing those masks because they knew that their schools were toxic. They knew that there were 11 million square feet of asbestos in the 215 schools in Philadelphia, They knew that there were mold that occurred because the HVAC systems were not working properly over the summer. They knew that they would start school early in August and have to leave immediately because their schools were too hot for them to learn in. They knew that there were skull and crossbones spray painted over their water fountains because the water was not potable for them to drink because of the lead pipes. They knew this, and they saw the vermin in the schools. They saw the rats, they saw the roaches, they saw the mice, and they saw their droppings that made them very unhealthy and triggered a ton of asthma attacks and other issues in schools. In Philadelphia, there are students and teachers that pass out because the vinyl on their floors are melting and causing them to inhale those noxious fumes. And again, this was before the pandemic. In Chicago, in Baltimore, in New York, in Mississippi and in Arizona, all across the country, our schools have been disinvested for decades, nearly a century. The federal government has refused to put money towards improving these facilities, and they continue to take additional dollars so that principals and school districts and superintendents are fighting over pennies when the federal government can step in and make a real investment for change. We bring about this research because we see this as a pivotal moment for the federal government to step in and really invest in our future and invest in our present. In addition to the jobs that Congressman Bowman mentioned in schools and building schools, there will also be lots of opportunities for students to learn in new and different ways. We want to bring about locally embedded curriculum so that students know the history of why their schools look like this, so that they know more about redlining, and that schools that were in redline communities had less property taxes because they had lower property values and never got the revenues to properly care for their schools. And so we are so excited to bring about this wonderful research and legislation that was founded in the movement of so many students, so many alumni, so many educators, so many community activists that made this research possible. We do this for them. And so I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very happy to introduce this with you all. And I'm going to pass the mic because I know we're running late. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to bring up Mr. Santos Rodriguez from New York City Building Trades. Again, this doesn't happen without collaboration. Look at who's coming to the mic. Myself, researchers and professors, and now someone from the building trades. So, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Congressman Bowman, for the opportunity to speak today. We are equally as excited for this Green New Deal for the schools, being a product of New York City, being a product of NYCHA, being a product of the school systems, and spending maybe one summer, at least very hot summer, at summer school. I could understand the need personally for this, but even greater the need for the transition, right? We speak about jobs, we speak about the school. It all starts with the students. We have to prepare our students for our future, which we're living in now. So when we speak about jobs, the labor standards that are held within this, creating a path to the middle class, creating a path that will sustain families here in the Bronx, here in the city, here throughout the country with good wages and benefits is key. We do not need to live off of a system that hasn't done much for our communities. So this is very important. This is key to us to help bring in more people like myself, like these students back here, to provide for their families and really set up a new construction, possibly industry, right? When we think about encouraging a transition into a green environment, a net zero carbon footprint here and across the country. So I won't take up too much time, but thank you very much, Congressman. This has been a pleasure. We're excited about this. Take care.
All right. So before I introduce the next speaker, I just want to say a few words about him. He has been a leader and a voice for transformative change in our public schools since he was a candidate. He always picks up the phone, he's always present, he's always responsive, and he ran for office and then implemented a universal pre-K program here in New York City that then went statewide and now it's being picked up by the Biden administration and is going national. So that right there for me made him a leading voice in public education. But now, as we come to the conclusion of his tenure as mayor, for him to go out with a bang and introduce a literacy for all agenda, focus on early childhood education, developing a unique mosaic curriculum that meets the unique needs of New York City, lifting up our children with special needs, lifting up STEM education. I'm happy to call him a partner and friend in this public education work, and we will continue to work in collaboration going forward because we need everyone to make our public schools work for everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Everybody, this is a very important day. It really is, because if we're going to get it right for our kids, we have to be bold. We have to do things very, very differently. And Congressman Jamaal Bowman is showing us the way, not just for New York, but for the whole nation. What you are seeing today, a Green New Deal for our public schools, will transform the United States of America. It will transform this country permanently. That's a vote of confidence in the Congressman's plan right there. This is what we have been waiting for. The kind of change on a national level that would reach every child. Remember way back when they said, leave no child behind, and then they proceeded to leave a lot of kids behind? Jamaal Bowman is talking about actually bringing every child with us to a better future. I gotta tell you, I feel some envy for everyone who will get to serve ahead, because when this plan becomes the law of the land, power positive thinking, brother, when this plan becomes the law of the land, every mayor in America, every chancellor and superintendent will be able to do things that previously we could only have dreamed of. When we have schools that are ready to truly serve our children, our families, because they're modern, because they're clean and green, doors are going to open. When we have a curriculum that is of and for and by every child, doors open. When we provide the social services and the emotional support, doors open. So this is what we've dreamed of, but now it's actually here. I gotta tell you, every day I am so impressed by what I see from Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi. But I know part of why they are doing what they are doing is because of leaders like Jamaal Bowman, helping to push the spectrum. Voices saying, here's where we really need to go. And you know, once upon a time, you heard people say, Green New Deal, oh, that's way too ambitious, and now it has become mainstream as an idea. Well, this too, Green New Deal for our public schools this is an idea that's going to catch fire. It's going to catch fire all over the country. One more thing I want to say. We have tried so hard the last 8 years to change public education in the city, and I know we have. But I also know the many times where if we had only had a little more help, we could have reached so many more kids. But even without a federal government that was always there for us, or a state government that was always there for us, we were able to do a lot. We were able to do pre-K for all our kids. Soon, every 3-year-old, 3K will be universal as well for all our children. And yes, we will go out with a bang with a new universal mosaic curriculum with a focus on literacy. Listen, if what kids read and what they're taught doesn't relate to them, it will not work. Right? Simple as that. So universal mosaic curriculum is simply listening to the voices of parents and children and educators and doing what we should have done a long time ago. And I want to give credit to our Chancellor, Misha Ross Porter, for leading the way. Now, I could say, I was going there, Pat. I was going there. When you put the Bronx in charge, good things happen. And I want to say, I mentioned how in the past we didn't always have the support we needed and deserved. But I want to give Senator Bailey credit, because this last budget in Albany, and particularly the CFE funding, was literally what we all fought for 20 years, and now it's here. Thank you, Senator. And councilmen, thank you, because when we went to the city council, we said we want to literally provide every child the emotional support they need. We're going to do a screening for every child for mental health and then give them the help they need. We're going to do an academic screening and then give the support they need. The city council was there with us every step of the way. Thank you, council members. So everybody, I'll conclude with this. Elections do matter. 8 years ago, Congressman's right. I said pre-K for all. I guarantee you the powers that be said it would be impossible. I would love to show you the many, many statements by the learned people and the powerful people who said that is a pipe dream, that is impossible, except guess what? Today in New York City, every child gets pre-K for free. Universal pre-K. So fast forward to today. Elections do matter. Here's a visionary. Here's a visionary standing in front of us right here in a transformative moment in history. Check your history, everyone. This is like the 1930s. This is one of those moments where everything came together, including a lot of pain, but also a lot of possibility. And the world got transformed. And this is going to be a lasting transformation. If you question that, I always say, reach into your wallet or your pocketbook, pull out your Social Security card. That was something from the 1930s, and it's still here now. So this Green New Deal for public schools will happen. It will transform American education. It will finally allow us to reach every child and to compete in the world, the thing America has not done, to create an education system that's truly as strong as what we see around the world, because the investment wasn't there until now. But with Jamaal Bowman's leadership, it's going to be there, and the world is about to change. Thank you, and God bless you, Congressman.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. So thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Before I go to the next speaker, I just want to say a word about community organizing, community engagement, and democratic leadership. Because we organized across the country against the previous president, Joe Biden was able to win the White House. Because we organized across the country, but particularly in states like Georgia, Democrats were able to win the Senate. As a result of that, we were able to pass the American Rescue Plan, which is bringing much needed resources to historically ignored communities, particularly to our public schools. But also today, 90% of the children in this country are going to receive their child tax credit payments. And that's going to continue throughout the year. And that's because of democratic leadership across this country. The next speaker, I think, is perfectly positioned to work with the mayor to properly implement the American Rescue Plan money for our public schools. She's my former boss and former mentor, and is now, she was a good boss, and is now the boss of everyone in the whole New York City school system. It's my honor, and it's unreal. Like, we're here right now. It's really crazy. It's kind of unreal that we're here right now, but it's my honor to introduce Schools Chancellor Misha Ross-Porter.
Congressman Bowman, Principal Wynn, and Principal Mangar, I want you to report to your summer school duties. Because welcome back home to the Bronx. Welcome to your summer school site. And Santos, I have to tell you, I remember hot summers, both as a student and as a leader. And so welcome, welcome, welcome. It's always good to be back home in the Bronx. Our friends welcomed us, and our friends at home are so good to see you all. You know, Congressman Bowman, I'm going to thank you for championing a plan that puts children and underserved communities first and at the center. Two groups that we know are dear to your heart and to all of our hearts. I am so heartened to have a representative like you in Washington showing up for our families and our kids, just like you did as a principal here in District 11 in the Bronx. And here in New York City, we know the feeling well when people show up for us. This administration is constantly thinking outside of the box, constantly thinking about putting in the work to build more equitable schools. Whether it was being the first major district in the country to offer universal pre-K, our new universal mosaic curriculum, which ensures that all of these beautiful young people see themselves in the experiences they have every day in classroom, and that it is a curriculum, yes, developed for young people, by young people, with teachers, with families, with communities. That is what this moment is about. I also know that this moment that Congressman Bowman is presenting to us, this moment is about building the schools that sit in communities that we all deserve. Schools are second homes for our children, and they need to reflect that. And so this is an absolutely vital investment to protect our schools and recognize the threat of climate culture, because y'all looking hot out here today. And so this is just building on, like Congressman Bowman said, the initiatives we've already started to build on. We have an Office of Sustainability at the Department of Education. We look forward to partnering on this in this moment. Our commitment to make our school bus fleet fully electric by 2035. Don't get me to do the electric slide out here. It's too early. And the mayor's dying to dance with me again, I hear. And expanding our teacher pipeline to recruit and train new teachers, teachers of color, teachers from our communities, teachers who represent the students they serve and can speak to their experiences. And working to make our school buildings more energy efficient, including installing solar panels, reducing water waste, as well as our Meatless Mondays and our Zero Waste School programs. And I know there's a principal wondering how we're going to make this building more green today. And so there's no doubt the new Green Deal for public schools will help New York City and districts across the country, and will continue to ensure that New York City and New York City public schools chart the path forward for this nation to strengthen academics, build greener schools, and combat climate change. And so I thank you for your time, Congressman Bowman. You know the principals are very serious about you reporting for summer school duties. And anyone else here? Summer is rising. Thank you so much. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here.
You know, that's actually, she made a joke, but that's actually not a joke of principals looking for me to report to my duties for summer school. That actually really happened. Okay, you've heard enough from the adults. I want to bring up a couple of students because a lot of this work is already happening in our schools. So the first student I want to bring up is Julian Ortiz, who's representing Groundwork out of Yonkers, New York. Julian, come on up.
Hi, I'm Julian Ortiz. I go to school in Yonkers Public Schools. I'm 17, and I just want to say a quick few things about our schools themselves and what's in them. So in my school, there's around 300 people in my graduating class, but we only have 2 counselors. So they have around 150 students each. There's no way for us to form meaningful connections with 150 students for each counselor. That's such an immense workload that there's really nothing they can do. They could try and meet with every student and it would be nearly impossible. And then our teachers, most of our classrooms, they're all 30 students each. So it's also, again, nearly impossible for them to focus on every student, especially the people that need it the most. You can just go forgotten. Then within our schools, we lack, as people have mentioned earlier, the climate change, the climate resiliency, the climate adaptation, that education. I was lucky enough to get it through a groundwork program called the Science Barge, but a lot of people don't have that. From that program, I was able to develop my interest in STEM and STEAM, and I desire a career in that field now, but a lot of people aren't as fortunate to get those things. So developing school curriculums with that in mind, with that climate adaptation, the climate resiliency, the climate change, just all of that education I feel would be a wonderful addition, and working with those local groups and local organizations like Groundwork to bring that about. Working with those local groups would just be wonderful in kickstarting that interest and bringing those leaders of the future by teaching them what they need to know and getting them ready to protect our planet in the future. And like we've mentioned, and like some of our signs portray, I know we have one about the clean water or something over there. So my school, our water quality reports, they were pretty bad, and in a lot of our rooms you can look up and see the mold on the ceilings. So how are we supposed to learn when there's not clean air, there's not clean water? How can you focus when you can't breathe in the air safely? So we deserve clean air, we deserve clean water, and we need that infrastructure to get there. And also, in addition to that, everything we deserve more as well. Like retrofitting our buildings with solar panels or adding gardens, just those resiliency investments, that contributes to a future that is safe and sustainable. And that's, again, something we need. So I just want to say I'm looking forward to this. I see a brighter future ahead with this in mind. And coming from a really high needs district, I really would love to see these improvements. Thank you.
So I'm super proud to bring up one of my former students from Casa Middle School, because some may know Casa tried to implement, or did implement, we didn't try, a Green New Deal style curriculum a few years ago, where we were growing organic fruits and vegetables for an outdoor garden that we had over the summer. So yes, absolutely. So it's my honor to bring up Miss Jimena Galvez, former Casa Middle School student.
My name is Jimena, and I recently graduated from Cornerstone Academy for Social Action Middle School. During my time there, I had a class where we learned about horticulture, agriculture, and the current climate crisis. At CASA, we had a school garden where me and my fellow classmates were able to plant and grow our own plants and vegetables. We grew seeds under grow lights, which we then planted outside and nurtured until we were able to eat them. My teacher for this class, Ms. Chanel, would also tell us the importance of healthy food and how to find it affordably in the Bronx at farmers markets and farm shares. We were able to cook with organic produce we grew and vegetables Ms. Chanel would bring us from a farm in New York. We were taught the importance of climate change and how we could help decreasing CASA's food scraps in landfills, as well as make sure we were all recycling. With our green team at CASA, I presented how to properly recycle with our new bins to our entire school building. I think it's important for kids in schools to learn about the current climate crisis so they can help decrease their own carbon footprint and their school's carbon footprint to help reduce carbon pollution, extreme weather, and poor air quality, which will affect the lives of future generations. We should fight for the Green New Deal for public schools to make sure we lower our carbon footprint enough to help stop the climate crisis before it's too late.
Okay, moving right along. Thank you so much, Jimena. So many years ago, I forget how long ago, I like to watch TED Talks. Some of you may also do that. And I come across this TED Talk with this really rambunctious, boisterous, excitable, crazy white dude talking about something called the Bronx Green Machine. So I'm like, who is this guy, right? So I do a little research, and I realize that he's working in New York City public schools, but of course he's working in the South Bronx. See what I'm saying? Everybody in the South Bronx. We're about to change all that. Okay? But we need to start doing a lot more of this in the North Bronx. So I want to bring up maybe one of the people who kind of sparked the idea of helping me to understand what a Green New Deal might look like in our schools. Bronx Green Machine CEO, co-founder, and relentless advocate for green education in schools, Mr. Stephen Ritz. Stephen Ritz, like the cracker.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wow. Is the Bronx in the house? Where's our chancellor? So, listen, we know for years that we have been the canaries in the coal mine. And I am of the belief that the greatest natural resource in the world is the untapped potential residing in communities like ours and like this and across the Bronx each and every day. And you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start in order to be great. And today is a great day for a start, so Madam Chancellor with the green dress, is she gone? I salute you. You know, yes, I work in the South Bronx. I'm a lifelong Bronx resident, but less than 1 mile from here is the largest organic soil farm in the Bronx that was built by 17 students who came out of Rikers looking for an opportunity. 15 years later, that farm stands, and none of those 17 children were back in jail, but are actually homeowners, New York City teachers, New York City policemen, and laborers. And best of all, Jamal's actually been to the farm and eaten our tomatoes. I always say it's communities like ours that have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And to that respect, I want to shout out my principal, Luis Torres, who in the middle of Claremont Village has given us an opportunity to build something that has literally changed the world, because the Bronx can change attitudes now. And we have built one of the most amazing low-cost replicable classrooms in all of the United States. So much so that His Royal Highness the Green Sheikh is coming from the UAE to the South Bronx on Wednesday to visit our classroom and see what's going on. So I always like to say, from the Bronx to the world, the degree to which we resist injustice is the degree to which we are all free. So let's get out there and make epic happen from the Bronx to the world. Thanks all of you.
See what I'm saying? See what I mean? It's a revolution right here. Thank you so much, Steve. Great to see you.
Get back to school, so I'm on my way. I got even responsibility.
Appreciate you. It's my honor to call up Mr. Jeff Vakrat from Climate Jobs New York. Mr. Jeff.
Thank you very much, Congressman. It's very good to be here. Congressman Bowman's bill highlights both the urgency and the opportunity to invest in public schools, a priority that I know we all share, and to do it in a way that prioritizes the schools that are most in need of investment, and to do it in a way that accomplishes a whole lot of things at once. We can give kids in schools the opportunities, the tools that they need to succeed. We can make schools more energy efficiency, save schools millions of dollars in energy costs. We can create thousands of good union jobs, and we can make schools healthier and safer for kids. And schools need to be near the top of the priority list when we're talking about federal infrastructure. I just want to talk for a second about New York City as an example of the opportunity of investing in schools. So there's been good work in New York City for several years to start putting solar on schools, to do energy efficiency retrofits in schools. Now is the time to go big. Now is the time to go across New York City schools. So earlier this year, several key unions working with Climate Jobs New York launched a carbon-free and healthy schools campaign to do energy audits across every school building in New York City, to follow up with energy efficiency retrofits and wherever possible solar power. And when and if we accomplish that, federal funding is going to be crucial. And we can accomplish a lot here in New York City. Just here in New York City, we can have the impact of planting, the equivalent of planting 400,000 trees, that impact on emissions. We can create thousands of good union jobs. We can address a lot of longstanding facilities issues in schools. And we can save schools about $70 million a year in energy costs. So this is the kind of opportunity in New York City that can be replicated across the nation. So we are very excited to be working with everyone who shares those goals, parents, students, community, elected leaders, and teachers to make all of that happen. And we applaud Representative Bowman for his leadership on investing in schools and investing in a way that accomplishes all these things at once.
All right. It's my pleasure to bring up a brother who has been with me in this fight for public schools for at least 10 years. The mayor stole some of my thunder, but I wanted to really acknowledge him and shout him out for the work he did to finally pass the Campaign for Fiscal Equity and bring much needed state resources to our public schools. He is our state senator. He is also chair of the Bronx Democratic Party, Senator Jamaal Bowman.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm excited to be here because I remember once upon a time I walked into, and I got an email from someone who had the similar spelling of my first name, exactly the same spelling of my first name. And I thought that it wasn't just a coincidence, it was something that we should follow up on. So I sat in his brother's office at Casa Middle School as a principal. And he broke down and spoke about adverse childhood experiences. And he talked about trauma. And he talked about how we can't expect our children to succeed unless we remove the barriers from them. Great moments do come from great opportunity, but we have to give our kids the chance. Our brothers and sisters in the building trades know that if you don't have a foundation, it doesn't matter how high you build, the building's gonna fall. And the foundation in our communities is and always will be education. So Dr. Jamaal Bowman, thank you for always prioritizing that, not just in the Bronx, but in Westchester County as well. Because let's not be divisive, y'all, let's be real. In the Bronx and in Mount Vernon, there are streets that have the same exact name. When you go to Duryea Avenue, it stops here in the Bronx and it starts there in Mount Vernon, but those brothers and sisters on each side of that street, they deserve an opportunity at education. And I can tell you that as a public school parent, as a public school kid, K through JD, I am testament to that when public schools are invested in, you can have something that works. But now it's time to make sure that everybody gets something that works. And yes, in the state, we've been able to, and I'm excited that we've been able to finally close that loophole for that Campaign for Fiscal Equity and get what our students deserved, finally, in the state of New York, satisfying that. But it's about building more. And it's about recognizing that nothing happens in a silo, that everything is part of an ecosystem. When constituents come to our offices with concerns, it is rarely one thing that they are saddled with. If there is an issue with education, there might be an issue with jobs, and there might be an issue with housing. How do we fix that? By making sure our children are centered in all of this. So this Green New Deal for education, critical. Because not if, but when we get this done. When we get this done, our children are going to have a brighter future. They're going to be able to look at the Bronx as ground zero to say, this is where you can get it done. This is where the talent is from. And it doesn't just take us as elected officials and elected leaders. It takes the Coach Muggsies and the Sophia Reeves and the Pat Williams and the Johnny Goffs and the Diletta Piñas who care about our community. It takes their buy-in too. So brothers and sisters, I need for us to stand with our congressman as he embarks upon this. Because the legislative path is not always easy. As a matter of fact, it's rarely easy. But when you start out with something so ambitious, with something that we need, we have to make sure that we have his back. Not just here in the 16th, but in D.C. as well. So we have to make sure that we have his back. Because it's hard to fight some things. It's hard to fight some things, right, Congressman? Yes, he knows a thing or two about fighting things. And that's the reason why he's here. So we got to fight behind him. We got to make sure we stand with him and not just from a distance, stand right beside him. And so with that, I'm grateful for the leadership of our mayor with the pre-K, our amazing Chancellor, Misha Ross Porter, my council member, my brother who's also a fellow girl dad, and most importantly, a fellow public school parent, because we're not just talking about it. We believe in public schools. That's why our kids are there. And for the generations that haven't come yet, we're excited for you in advance because of what this Green New Deal for public schools will bring. Thank you.
I am also a girl dad. My honor, my privilege to bring up another brother, another fighter in the struggle, fighter for liberation, for success. We struggle towards the win. My brother, City Council member Kevin Rowley.
This is a remarkable brother that we have right here that we elected. A brother that wanted to make change. I call him Principal Bowman because I started in government 13 years ago and I had the privilege to work with this brother. And he has an investment that he wants to bring to our children within our community. The Green New Deal, $1.43 trillion may seem like a lot, but it's nearly not enough to invest in our children within our communities. If we're going to move our children forward within the 21st century, we can't have our children continue to come to schools and look at blackboards. Our teachers not having enough supplies to educate our children. How can we produce the children of the future? The children of the future, right? That's what I was told when I was young. That's what Coach Muggsy told me when I was young, when he used to coach us and we used to go to our basketball tournaments. He told me I was the future. And that's why I'm able to win my election this year. I'm able to stand in front of you. We need to produce more children within our district, but we're not going to produce those children if we don't invest. Flowers are beautiful, but it's the seeds that we have to take care of. It's the seeds that we have to continue to water. It's the seeds that we have to nurture in order to make that beautiful flower. So if we're talking about the environment, that's so needy that I said flowers. If we're talking about the environment, if we're talking about infrastructure within our school system, it's so imperative, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, that we're actually investing into infrastructure moving forward. So my brother, thank you so much. We elected this brother, and I knew he was going to make transformational change, and he's starting already with this bill. So I completely stand by you, and I thank you so much, brother, for presenting this today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. So, you know, Brother Kevin Rowley brings up a good point. He mentioned 1.43 trillion sounds like a lot. Take a guess at how much we're spending on weapons manufacturing right now in the federal government. Take a guess on how much we're spending for missiles, bombs, aircraft carriers, and jets. If we can invest that on the military-industrial complex, we can invest just as much or more on our children in our public schools. My honor and privilege to bring up Brother Kumar Rove from the Working Families Party.
Thank you, Representative Bowman. Thank you for your leadership and your commitment to justice, and all the other speakers and participants here for their activism and community commitments as well. Special shout out to the young people and the students for your leadership and your work. We know at the Working Families Party we are facing two competing catastrophes: a climate crisis worsening by the year and what feels like the day here in New York, and the broad, decades-long disinvestment in our public schools. These are basic racial justice issues. It's Black and brown communities at the greatest risk of health issues from climate change, and it's Black and brown children whose schools are being deprived of critical educational resources. And that's only become more apparent during the pandemic, as children of color experience the greatest barriers to quality remote learning. And yet, Black and brown and low-income kids continue to be more likely to be learning in aging and deteriorating buildings. As New York's progressive political party, we are here to address these crises head-on as a key priority. We're committed to supporting candidates like Jamaal Bowman and officials like Jamaal Bowman committed to education, racial, and climate justice. Jamaal Bowman's Green New Deal for public schools is a landmark investment in our public education system and for climate readiness. The details of this bill are incredible. Upgrading school infrastructure to create carbon-free learning environments for our kids, smaller classrooms, better teacher-to-student ratios, removing toxic materials like mold and asbestos that threaten the very health of our young people, our teachers, and school staff. The Green New Deal for public schools will create over 1 million new jobs and result, this is wild, this stat, eliminates millions of metric tons of carbon, the equivalent, I think, of taking 17 million cars off the road. I mean, think about that. The New York Working Families Party, the working families across the country, we're in full support of this bill and urge all of our champions in Congress to co-sponsor it once it's introduced and incorporate it actually into the current infrastructure, care, and budget package that is currently being drafted in DC, so we can finally allow and build an education system that reflects our values and allows our children and planet to thrive. Thank you, Representative Bowman.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We are almost done. It is my honor to bring up Mr. James Innes from the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA.
All right, so I'm not going to take up much time. We've heard a lot from a lot of great speakers. I just want to paint a picture real quick. So imagine a city across America where all the children are studying arts and sciences. in buildings that are comfortable every day of the year. Whether it's hot or cold outside, whether the air, the walls, and the water are clean and healthy. Now that sounds like a pipe dream, and it's kind of ridiculous that sounds like a pipe dream in the richest country in the United States of America. Why is wanting adequate classrooms for our kids a pipe dream? And why is wanting healthy classrooms for our teachers a pipe dream? It's kind of embarrassing for the richest country on the planet, and we cannot wait until something truly bad happens to one of our kids to do something about a problem we all know we have. I'm from the Bronx. I'm from about 20 minutes from here. I didn't go to Sousa, I went to 135. But I care about the kids up here just like I care about the kids where I'm from. And the kids where I'm from and up here and the kids all around this country deserve better classrooms, clean water, and healthy environments to learn. Public schools are national public good. There are almost 100,000 of them in America, serving 9 out of 10 children. And our federal government has ignored them for far too long. It's time our public schools receive the national investments they deserve. A Green New Deal for public schools will not only repair historic harms to communities, but also help create building blocks for a more equitable future. With the PRO Act, we made over 1 million calls to get that act into the consciousness of working class Americans around the country. And right now, the work that we need to do for a Green New Deal for public schools is going to build on what we did for the PRO Act. And now the PRO Act has just been added to the Senate budget agreement. So the work is what gets this going. We're hearing a lot about what we want, but we have to put some work in. And I'm just gonna say that to say, bit.ly Green New Schools. It's the website. I'm the organizer here, I guess. This is where we're organizing through. Everybody go to that website, see where you can fit into this fight with us. Because we're gonna be fighting to September for the congressperson, and we need everybody out there too. We're in New York City, we're in Jacksonville, Florida, we're all the way out in Kern County, California. But we need everybody in between to join in, go to that website and help out. My friend from the Working Parent Families just said, there's a bill that's going to be passed by September. There is going to be money and resources in that bill. And that money and resources are going to flow to these electeds back here. And we need to make sure when they get this money, that money is for the future and not the past. It's to make sure our kids have a safe environment and the teachers teaching them have that environment too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last but certainly not least, we have to hear from a teacher. And it's my honor to bring up a teacher, founding staff member from Cornerstone Academy for Social Action, Casa Middle School, school where I used to be principal of, Miss Dawnette Phelps, Casa teacher and union chapter leader. Please come on.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am extremely excited to be here today. And I heard the Chancellor, and I did complete my assignment at summarizing today. And as I was leaving out the door, I had students asking me, Ms. Phelps, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to let everybody know how important you are. So my name is Dawnette Phelps, and I do have the privilege of serving at Cornerstone Academy Middle School for Social Action. It is a Title I school not too far from here, certainly in the Bronx. And I am here to show my support for the Green New Deal for Public School Act. As an educator, I do know the value of smaller class sizes. I do know the value of properly funded classes and classrooms to create more opportunities to further meet the needs of our students and certainly my students. It is my goal to expose them to new things that can potentially cause them to dream bigger about their future. As a science teacher, to know that this bill directly addresses climate change will help to make that future a certain thing. As a middle school social action school, our students are aware too. They have lifted their voices, made signs and posters, and marched around our school and our community to bring awareness about climate change and the need for reform for our climate crisis. And I know that we are not unique to this. So this bill will truly show them that the country cares and that the country is certainly listening to them. Our children deserve this. They are brilliant. They are talented. And yes, they are worth it. So I want to thank Congressman Jamaal Bowman, who is my former principal, for leading this charge and for caring about our kids, our public schools, and our community the way he does. Now, I know it's going to take continued commitment and dedication and a fight to get this bill through, but I'm a woman of faith, and I believe God, and I know that God does everything well, and this bill will go through. So let's give it up for the Green New Deal for public schools. Thank you for listening.
I knew you was going to do it. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll take 2 or 3 questions, and then we got to move on. So any questions from the press?
Do you have any specific infrastructural changes to reduce carbon emissions in school buildings?
Absolutely. So retrofitting the school buildings in alignment with the demands of a green economy is something that's a major part of this, right? Solar panels, installing solar panels on our schools is another major part of this. We're looking at geothermal options as well, but retrofitting solar panels and a few other areas. Thank you. Yes.